Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now today, I want to learn more about how EdTech can make higher education more accessible and how data analytics is transforming the college recruiting process, and share a few insights into the shift of virtual search and recruitment channels for higher education. So today's guest is Rohan Pasari, and he co-founded Cialfo with the vision to make education accessible for 100 million students globally. And Cialfo has also raised 3 rounds of funding, most recently a $15 million in Series A round. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Singapore, where Rohan Pasari is waiting to speak with us now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thank you, Neil. Thank you for having us. I'm Rohan Pasari, co-founder and CEO of Cialfo. We are a leading college counseling and networking platform for students, higher ed institutions, and counselors around the world. We started Cialfo about 3 years back to really make education accessible for 100 million students globally.
Excellent. And I've got to ask, though, a question I always like to ask my guests before we dig a little bit deeper into the work that you're doing is, where did your love of technology come from, and how did that lead to education or EdTech? And can I ask that you share your origin story and what it was that put you on this path that you're on right now?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? To be really honest, it was really my love for education that got me to the path of EdTech rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
We really wanted to solve a problem in education. In fact, our previous company was more of a tech-enabled education consultancy, but we and I'm happy to go deeper with that. And to solve a problem at scale, the only way to do that was technology. And I do have an engineering background, so that came into the picture, and we started, developing a technology platform. So in some ways, it's the other way around, Neil.
And from there, of course, you went on to co-found Cialfo with the vision to make education accessible for 100 million students globally, which is incredible. But can you expand on that for me?
Yeah. Before we, talk about what Cialfo does, maybe I'll share a little more about why we started doing it. And that really came from my own experience of applying for colleges around the world. So I grew up in India, and I went to a school where we had no college counselors or really any access to technology that could help us navigate through this complex process of knowing what I wanted to study, where I wanted to study, whether it would be India or somewhere abroad. So I was completely lost, right? And what would you do when you're a 15-year-old? You speak to your friends, you speak to your seniors, you speak to your elder siblings, you speak to your parents, and most of the people who I spoke with said, "Oh, you're good in science, you should do engineering." But that's not what I thought my calling was. And contrary to popular belief, it was not any amount of parental pressure. My parents were super chill. They were not pushing me to do engineering. It was really the society which I thought was pushing me in a certain direction. So, I went to a career counselor, took a bunch of aptitude tests. And guess what, Neil? Lo and behold, they said, do engineering. So I took up, decided that would be probably the right path. But just navigating through the college application process was super daunting. I took my SATs. I was looking at the US. I was also considering the UK. But as a student, who has not had any siblings or friends, gone abroad, it was extremely daunting. And then when you look at financing your undergrad education, that's when I sort of gave up for international education. because my parents were like, look, son, we love you, but we don't have $250,000 to spend on your undergrad degree. At the same time, NUS and NTU, a couple of leading institutions in Singapore and now globally recognized institutions, came to my high school to promote the institutions. I was really inspired about what they had to offer. So I applied, took a test, and I got a full scholarship to study in Singapore, and I took that up. And that was a transformational experience for me. And that also gave me an opportunity to not only study engineering, but to study economics and entrepreneurship. The running joke in India is that, if you don't know what you want to do, you take up engineering. but this, widened my opportunities. And if you see that path, you'll see my education was not so much by design, it was by chance. And that's not how it should be, right? Education should be by design and not by chance. And to solve that, we started Cialfo. And to do that at scale, we wanted to help 100 million students globally. And the only way to be able to access that population around the world and give them that information, access to financial resources, is through technology.
And how is it you think that EdTech can make a higher education more accessible around the world? Because I know you've got great experience in this, and for people outside of the industry, can you expand on how much of a difference it can make?
Yeah, absolutely. It's already happening. As you would imagine, if you think about where technology is being used today in education, it is facilitating learning on the go for students. It is enabling access to vast library of resources for students, and not just students, actually, just for individuals, for everyone, right? And in the classroom, technology is helping teachers better measure student performance and identify learning gaps. Where it was, based on what a teacher thought, based on their experience, teachers can now use technology tools to measure that performance. Now at Cialfo, we are making that access come true by in the transition for students from high schools to universities, giving them tools, giving them information to be able to access university application process and apply to those universities directly through one tool. So that's just a few examples.
How are you finding data analytics is transforming the actual college recruiting process too? Do you have any insights you can share about that shift into virtual search and recruitment channels for higher education? Because it's moving so quickly, isn't it, this space?
Yeah, and especially we've seen a massive acceleration of adoption of technology and data since the pandemic, when people were forced to adopt technology, and that allows you to gather more data, makes people more comfortable around data and technology. It's been a 10x really increase in adoption. And if you look at it from both sides of how data analytics is used in the college recruiting process, if you look at it from the student point of view, right? Because at the end of the day, everyone is working for the students, right? We're working to make sure that students have the best outcome. And now, there is millions of data that can be used to determine a student's academic fit, preference fit, and demonstrated interest. So let me expand into that a little further. An academic fit would be, a student's academic profile, their extracurricular profile, and which colleges they could get into or not get into. Right? You may be a fit for Imperial College, for example, or University of Bath, academically. But are you really a preference fit? Do you want to study in London and go to like an Imperial or King's, or do you want a more of a town experience and go to a college which is not in the city? And that's where the preference fit comes in. And it's completely different. And you may have a preference for a certain college, but you may not have the academic fit, right? You may not be able to actually have the grades or the profile to be able to actually get it. And then demonstrated interest. have you done enough research about that college? Just a couple of hours looking into the university's website, it's not really sufficient for you to know about whether this university would be a good fit. Have you participated in any of their virtual events? Have you participated in any of their campus tours, virtually or physically? If you're able to do that, have you spoken with any of their current students or alumni or their ambassadors? So all of those things, was possible very anecdotally. Now can be a lot more data driven, can be a lot more accurate. That's from the student point of view. Now, if you look at it from the university point of view, universities, are looking to brand themselves, get in front of students, build in those connections, engage those students, and make sure the right fit students enter their campuses. Now, traditionally, it's been done again in a very archaic way, but data can be used. Millions of data points is already at their disposal that can be used, and a lot of universities are using, but many are not, to see what behavioral data points, what academic data points would not only give you an indication that whether the student can get into a university or not, but actually what kind of students would succeed in your college, right? So which is the preference fit for students for that university? Can you look at the student data points across the high schools, match it with students that have graduated from your college successfully, been placed into institutes of higher learning, gone on to do their PhDs or research, or taken up jobs, and connect the two, right? So you can go through the entire student journey through the data and predict which universities or which students would be a good fit for you. So that is on the university side, how data can be used to best suit the needs. Now, not only which students, which countries should you be recruiting students from? Which are the underserved populations that you want to tap on to be able to increase the diversity of your student body. All of that can be sourced through data and can be a lot more data driven. In some ways, it's ironical where these universities pitch themselves as centers of innovation, and often they can be the slowest to adopt these innovative ways. But a lot of these universities that we work with are definitely early adopters, pushing the boundaries of using technology and data. And there's a lot for other universities to learn from them too.
And I also wanted to highlight that before you came on the podcast, I learned that you've also raised 3 rounds of funding, most recently a $15 million Series A round. So how is that funding enabling you to keep moving forward?
We want to be able to do things at a faster rate. We want to be able to enable adoption of technology for both high schools and universities at a faster rate, and hence, funding. So the funding really gives us 3 things. It allows us to continue being a market leader in the K-12 space with high schools, improving features, our value proposition at a much faster rate, localizing the needs of our communities around the world. And that really helps our value add to the community in the long term. And if you see, like in the first couple of years, we were really moving an incumbent solution from the K-12 space to get them to use Cialfo. And now we are a platform that is adopted by the schools. That is the first platform for those schools. So there's a lot of changes that's happening, and the funding allows us to do that. Then on the university side, the funding allows us to accelerate adoption of technology on their side, innovate their recruiting practices, allow them to directly connect with students so that they do not have to depend on agents or middlemen. And then thirdly, funding allows us to think bigger and look at any strategic acquisitions that we can make to consolidate the space. So those are 3 things that funding allows us to do.
Well, I always say at the end of every episode that technology works best when it brings people together. And I believe you've got offices in the US, Singapore, China, and India. So do you have any success stories that you can share for our international listeners on how tech is enabling you to make a difference? Because I think these words will resonate with people wherever they're listening.
Yes, and it's funny you say offices. We do have legal entities in these countries that you mentioned, in US, Singapore, China, and India. But besides Singapore, none of our offices are really operational. In that all of our team members in those countries are working from home, and we see like a blended work from home scenario. But anyway, that's as a side note. Really, our technology is to bring students and universities together. I'll share a couple of examples actually. In 2020, early 2020, China was the first to hit with the pandemic, as we all know, and it was a counselor that was already using Cialfo extensively that got us on a call and said, "Hey guys, we are not going to be able to do physical college tours on a campus this year because travel is banned in China. So how can Cialfo help?" And we were like, I don't know, this is very new for us. Let's figure it out. We want to help you. We want to help the students. So across a bunch of different weeks, we built out a platform to be able to connect these students with the universities directly through these virtual fairs. And we thought, this will be for 500 students, 20 universities maybe. And that first virtual event, Neil, we had about 5,000 students. In fact, no, 18,000 students that came in for that first virtual event, and over 100 universities joined in. And over 2020, we had over 1,000 university fairs sessions, and 400,000 students used our platform to connect with universities. So it started with one counselor, and it impacted 400,000 students and 1,000 universities, in fact, over 2020 participating in these fairs. So that's just one example of how technology can really bring people together. And another one, if you talk to our international counselors, they say that on average, a student in a school applies to 3 different countries. So not just 1 or 2 countries, applying to 3 different countries. They typically apply to universities in their home country, and then UK, US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Those are top international destinations. Europe, of course. But again, it was incredibly difficult for students to be able to apply to universities in different countries with different application processes. And then we built this feature called the Direct Apply that allows all the universities to come together and for the student to be able to apply to all of these different universities through one platform. And this counselor said, this was an incredible game changer. It's like a UCAS of the world, right? Not just for UK universities, but UCAS of the world. And, he described this as an app without borders. And again, it is an example of how technology can be used to really make education accessible and connect individuals around the world.
Love that. And as we continue to move forward, is there anything that excites you about the future of EdTech, and also, of course, the role that you're going to be playing in that future with Cialfo?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, one of the things that is not spoken about as often is really the talent boom the EdTech globally is receiving is incredible. The majority of the most talented people in the world, when you look at within the tech community, I'm not talking about outside of the tech community, within the tech community, we're working in e-commerce companies or fintech companies or taxi companies. Those were attracting large amounts of incredibly talented people, right? And now EdTech is one of those industries where talent is flowing to, and it's incredible to see how the quality of talent that we've been able to attract has changed. And when I ask them in interviews, like, what is, wanting you to leave the taxi, the ride-hailing industry, the Ubers and the Grabs of the world to join a Cialfo, the answer is like, I want to do something more meaningful in my life. And this provides meaning without me having to sacrifice my compensation or my lifestyle. And that's great, right? So I am incredibly excited on a daily basis to work with this incredibly talented team and accelerate the world towards a future that it should have been, it was going through, but it is now going at a much faster pace. And our role in EdTech is that, right? How can we help the world move to the next quantum leap using technology, using data, but really empowering the individuals, right? It's not replacing people, it's empowering the people, it's empowering the counselors, empowering the students, empowering the university representatives to be able to do their jobs better, to be able to help students achieve the right outcomes. And that acceleration of technology is what we are enabling. And that's super exciting.
We began our conversation talking about your origin story and where your love of tech and education and how they both fuse together. But a question I always like to ask my guests before I let them go is talk about a particular song or piece of music or that might have been the soundtrack to that journey that you've been on, or just helps you get your head in the zone before going in a big meeting or delivering a keynote speech. Is there a particular song that springs to mind for you that we can add to our Tech Talks Daily Spotify playlist?
Sure. What do you think about Starboy by The Weeknd?
Love it. Great tune.
I would ask the viewers to not focus so much on the lyrics that I'm going for here, but it's really the music, right? That keeps me going. I think it's epic, and I love his music, The Weeknd. And if you add that to the playlist, that would be great.
I will do that straight away. But before I let you go, for anyone listening wanting to find out more information about Cialfo and connect with your team, ask a few questions, what's the best way of doing that?
Sure, that would be awesome. LinkedIn is a great way to connect with me. I'm on Rohan Pasari, or you can also find us on our website, cialfo.co, and come say hello. Those are two ways that is easiest to connect with me.
Well, I love what you're doing. I love this vision of making education accessible for 100 million students globally. Incredibly ambitious, but using technology to do that and bring education together. It's incredibly cool. But more than anything, just thank you for taking the time to come on here and share your story with me today.
Thank you, Neil. Appreciate you giving us an audience. Thank you for that.
Love chatting with Rohan today, especially learning more about how data analytics is transforming that college recruiting process, and for offering his insights into the shift to virtual search and recruitment channels for higher education. And of course, the technology involved in all that, in bringing that goal of making education accessible for 100 million students globally, to bringing that to life is incredible. But over to you. If you've got any questions or would like to share your insights or experiences, please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk if you'd like to work with me. But I will return again tomorrow directly in your podcast feeds with another episode. So thanks for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.